Let's get to some numbers here, because the Patriots can certainly use Cook based on the 2023 season projections from our friends at Strat-o-matic. Here's someone's that stood out. You had Juju Smith-Schuster, only 719 receiving yards. Mike Gesicki projected to have 466 yards, 2 touchdowns. Pretty good season in store, perhaps, for Taekwon Thornton, who they've got with 580 yards, 6 touchdowns. And Strat-o-matic predicting a monster year for Rhamondre Stevenson, nearly 1,400 rushing yards. So let's break out the crystal ball and talk about these projections and whether you think, these seem kind of high, kind of low. Let's start with Juju Smith-Schuster. 67 catches, 720 yards, and 5 touchdowns. Cerrone, how would you feel about that if that's his season?
I think that's what I'd expect. I think he's the closest to being accurate on that list. I mean, I could see him getting that. Anything more than that, I think, would be gravy. The key with him is just staying healthy. How many games does he play? How many targets does he get? Are they featuring him, or are they going to feature the tight ends? But if this is what you get out of him and he's playing majority of the season, I mean, I'd take that for him. Yeah, I'm cool with those numbers.
Yeah, I think that big question is his health. And if he is healthy and puts up these numbers, I think that would be satisfactory. I don't know that it would be exceeding the expectations or would be considered great, but I think that would be a solid year in his first year in the offense, which, as we know, has been tough for some players to pick up in year one in New England.
I would absolutely take that because, again, I worry about the health. And this is like when everyone talks about worrying about Porzingis' health, for me, it's Juju Smith-Schuster going into this season. I mean, everyone kind of just, when they look at the wide receiver group as a whole, that wants to say that it's better than it was a year ago, they're relying on Juju Smith-Schuster somehow being better than Jacoby Myers. And those numbers right there, I think those would be good for him based on the risk. Let's go to the next one now. And we're going to talk about Mike Gesicki. Okay, so the Patriots tight end, they picked up 36 receptions, 466 yards, 2 touchdowns, expecting better or worse, Beetle?
Better on the 2 touchdowns. I would hope that the big free agent signing at tight end, the pass-catching tight end that so many times we've heard is more like a receiver than he is a tight end. Well, I would expect him to produce in the red zone, which is why you have quality tight ends. And so I would hope that number would be higher than 2 touchdowns. And how many catches?
36.
Yeah, I could go for a few more catches, too, if he's to be more like a receiver than he is a tight end.
Yeah, this one here, when I saw this, I'm like, what is he? Was there injury we don't know about? I mean, I would like to see him over that 5 touchdowns, 50 catches, 500 yards. For a guy like him, all the highlights we see of him is dancing in the end zone. The guy can get in the end zone, and if he ends the season with 2 touchdowns in 17 games, that's a failure to me in my book. I expect his numbers to be way higher than that, and I actually expect him to have the most touchdowns of any receiver on this team. That's my expectations for him, but 2 is way low. If he has 2, something went terribly wrong.
And he's playing for a contract too.
Playing for a contract.
Right? Yes.
If you also look at his numbers dropped last year. But again, you had Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. It's like, of course, you're going to throw the ball to those guys. If you go back a few years ago, he was a much more he was a bigger part of the Dolphins' offense. I don't understand why he can't be a bigger part of the Patriots' offense. So those numbers also look low to me. Meanwhile, let's take a look at we showed you the projections for Taekwon Thornton. That would be a big jump from his rookie season. One other interesting note. Thornton discussed bulking up during minicamp. He has added. He added 3 pounds. So will that lead to a year 2 leap for the second-year wideout, Cerrone?
I don't know about the 3 pounds, but I think he's going to have a better year. I think he's a very explosive player. He's the type of guy they really need, a guy that can take a slant and take it to the house. I expect him to have a lot of yards. I don't know about those touchdowns, but I want to see his numbers closer to what Juju has. I want to see them be a good combo at receiver, and I want to see his numbers a little higher, around 700 yards. I would love 6 touchdowns from him, but I want to see more catches and more yards out of Thornton, but I think he can be a big play guy.
He's got great speed, and you can't teach it. You can't teach that speed that he has. And he's got a great high ceiling as a result of that because of his ability to get down the field. And so is he the type of guy who can take the top off the defense? Is he the guy that you can throw a long pass to and have him take it to the house? Yes, all of that is true. But the thing that he's going to have to prove is that his small frame is going to handle a full NFL season and playing at this next level. And so far, we haven't seen that. And I hope he is a big play type of guy. He had an unfortunate one that slipped out of his hands last year in the month of December that I've sort of held against him this entire offseason. But he's got great potential. He's got great speed. He could be a big play guy. Is he going to hold up over the course of his 17-game schedule? I think that remains to be seen.
He kind of, to me, he's the biggest wild card in this receivers group. You know, if you can get something out of Taekwon Thornton, something to the point where you say, you know what, you have something going forward as well. Not just being productive this year, but, hey, you know, use this a second-round pick on this guy. You want to see some sort of return. So if he gives you something and he gives you those numbers, I'd be good with that. I think that's certainly a step in the right direction. Meanwhile, I mentioned Rhamondre Stevenson. They've got him at 1,400 rushing yards. If Rhamondre Stevenson goes for 1,400 rushing yards, Burt Breer's got an idea of what he might be wanting to do next year. Burt?
Albert?
Burt?
If I'm him, I'm not showing up for anything until I have a new contract. And I would advise every running back, be militant, hold your team's feet to the fire. If you have a good first 3 years, you should not show up for anything until they pay you. You should rattle cages. You should do everything you need to do. If Rhamondre Stevenson has this sort of year in year 3 that he had in year 2, then it's on him to hold the Patriots' feet to the fire. And if I were him, I would not show up for a damn thing until you get paid.
All right, well, that would make things interesting going into next year, especially if he could put up 1,400 rushing yards, which honestly sounds a little high, especially if you're just talking about rushing yards right there, Beetle. But do you think that's a possibility going into next season where you could see him holding out? Especially given the running back landscape.
I do, and I think a big part of that is this larger conversation about running backs now not being compensated well enough when they're in their prime, which happens a lot sooner than any other position on the field. They have the shortest lifespan by position in the NFL. And so I think long term, maybe the next CBA, I don't think it's going to happen overnight or anytime soon, but maybe they should visit how running backs are paid on their rookie deals when they have success, or ways for them to sign new contracts. And unfortunately, the thing that's going to lead them there is a guy like Rhamondre Stevenson holding out and not being willing to play after having big monster numbers year after year. And so those 1,400 yards, I could see it. I think there are huge question marks behind him on the depth chart on this team, and I think he's going to have plenty of opportunity, and I think the guy's an absolute beast. So I think he could absolutely put up those type of numbers. And if I were his agent, I would say the same thing. Don't show up for work next year. Flip side of that is Bill Belichick may not value running backs enough and might just say, okay, stay home. Yeah. You stay home. We're going to go to somebody else, which is sort of how running backs are treated in this league.
Yeah, I mean, I think if he gets 1,400 yards, yes, sit out. If he gets 1,400 yards, this team should be in good position. They should be a pretty decent team. And that's just 1,400 rushing yards, and he got a lot of targets last year. So you're talking about a guy with, almost 2,000 total yards of offense if he keeps going the way he's been going. So, yes, sit out, get your money, and don't do anything until that check comes in.